This is what 10,000 marbles looks like right before being dumped out of this automatic trapdoor and through this over-engineered system of mechanical marble moving contraptions. I built this because I got stuck watching these mesmerizing simulations by this amazing YouTube channel called Ball Simulations, and I couldn't help wondering if it was possible for these to actually work in real life. Like, what would it take to actually engineer and build a fully functioning ball simulation with 10,000 marbles? So I picked 12 different elements from the Ball Simulations videos and set off on a quest to bring these from the digital world into the real world. All to answer the bigger question, will this be as satisfying in real life as it is in the simulation? This video was made possible by Shopify. So first things first, I got myself 10,000 marbles, and I honestly thought that they would all fit into this huge vase, but this is only half. Yeah, that's a lot of marbles. And I know that I will inevitably be picking many of these off the floor because look at this clip from Ball Simulations. They can't even be contained in a simulation. I am so screwed. So we need a vessel that can contain all 10,000 marbles. And you'll notice that in every one of the videos from Ball Simulations, there's this similar starting hopper design. A beautiful clear case that tapers down to a trap door. And in the simulator world, you can kind of do whatever you want. If you want it clear, boom, you make it clear. If you want it to be wood, easy. Change the material, hit render, done. In the real world, you need to make decisions based on a number of things. Mainly, how easily can I make this thing exist? Often, I'll just 3D print everything. That's by far the easiest way to make any digital object just exist. But there's one big problem with that. This hopper 100% needs to be clear, like in the animations, to show off the entire stack of balls, and it's pretty much impossible to 3D print something on my normal machines that's clear enough to show off the beauty of 10,000 little pellets just waiting to escape and ruin my day. I considered laser cutting everything out of flat acrylic sheets and then putting the whole thing together, but there'd be seams where all the panels come together, so I was looking for some sort of alternative. And that's where Formlabs stepped in and completely saved the day, because they sent me this behemoth that, yes, my dad and I almost dropped while trying to get it onto this shelf. Strong moves from the old man here to make the save. This behemoth, the Form 4L, happens to be a 3D printer that can print clear parts. Crazy, right? And since it's a huge machine, that means it can print huge clear parts, which means that I can stick to my normal strategy and just 3D print the hopper. And after pretty minimal post-processing work, look at how sick this part turned out. But this was only half the battle, because if you take a closer look at the simulations, you'll see that the trapdoor just opens. That's a luxury you have in simulation world because you don't need to fully engineer how it opens. But in the real world, you have to figure this stuff out. And in this case, there are so many ways you can do this. You can use gears, you can use linkages, you can use cams, you can use strings, etc. I decided to go with the string method, which loops through the trapdoor over this idler and onto a pulley pulled by a pretty strong servo motor. As the motor turns forward, gravity allows the door to open, and as the motor turns back, the door shuts. And the main reason I chose this mechanism over all of the others was because I thought it would be the most fun. And it is. Check this out. This is so sick. And I have a feeling that this is going to perform really well in our testing later, where we're going to put a fixed amount of marbles through each module to see which one will be the fastest, as well as which one loses the least amount of marbles, because that 100% is going to happen. Now that the hopper's ready to go, let's start getting into the track elements. And for the first one, I'm taking inspiration from Ball Simulations V27, where the balls fall into this glass funnel thing. I got this glass lampshade, and I painstakingly designed a bobsled style in-ramp for it in SolidWorks, and then 3D printed it. This is the first attempt, which kind of sucks. There's this like weird corner here that's killing the motion of the balls. Here's the second attempt, which when combined with the lampshade with, yeah, I use hot glue here, but you get this. This is starting to look cool. Next, I designed this massive catching basket and cool ramp thingy. And after assembling the whole thing, I realized the basket wasn't tall enough. And by realized, I mean this. So I made it taller with this extension. And then finally, I added this cool wavy slide, also printed on my Formlabs machine. And boom, the first element is done. Although I don't know why, but I have this sneaking suspicion it's not going to perform that well on our efficiency test later. Anyways, before moving forward with our next element, a bit of a side quest, because I did also consider using this globe-shaped lampshade on this design, because I love the way the balls look when they're bouncing around in there. It's like confetti. Looks like a celebration. And when I was challenged by Shopify, who's sponsoring this video, to make an over-engineered shop notification system that physically shows you what it feels like when an order comes in, this is perfect. I might have taken it a bit too far. But Shopify is the set of tools that I use to run my online store, where I mainly sell my digital models that people with 3D printers can download and print themselves. Whenever I make a sale, I get a phone notification, which I guess the phone notifications work perfectly, but there's nothing mechanical going on here. Shopify does have this split flat counter available, which is actually quite mechanical, but it doesn't have marbles. So that's where this comes in. I started my Shopify store 5 years ago, and it took me less than a day to get it up and running. I don't know if I've even tweaked it really since then, but I've never had to change anything because it just kind of runs. It's like the opposite of the design for this shop notification. It's undercomplicated, if that's even a thing. Shopify has just made it easy to share my creations with the world, which when you're constantly over-engineering everything, it's kind of nice to have something that just works in the background. So if you're looking for what is probably the easiest way to get an online store up and running, start your free trial by going to shopify.com/engineeasy. And you can experience this feeling too every single time you get an order. All right, side quest complete. So let's get back to designing the third element out of 12. In some of the ball simulations videos, you'll come across this module, which is very similar to the fourth machine from my 9 satisfying ball contraptions video. To make this in real life, you need a base, a shaft that rotates a big marble pushing bar, some bearings to rotate on, and a way to rotate the shaft. In this case, I'm going to go with a pulley connected via a belt to the motor. To tension the belt, the motor here slides back on these slots, and you can see that I had to modify the part here because the belt I designed for was too short. Pretty straightforward and works well, and I feel like the efficiency score is going to be pretty high on this one. So that's 3 elements design, but the fourth might be my favorite out of all of them, which was inspired by this guy. This was actually a late add to the machine, but I like it so much that I had to make it. And I took a bit of a different approach than the one in ball simulations, where instead of a rack and pinion drive system, I decided to hide the motor in the base and connect it to the cart using a belt and pulley system. The cart rolls on these V-wheels, which are fixed to this rail, so there's no risk of it falling off the tracks and dumping marbles everywhere. The gate is controlled by a servo motor where I'm setting it an angle for open and an angle for closed. And since the cart is on a stepper motor, I can precisely control how far up and down the track it goes. The marbles drop into the cart, which drags them up the ramp and over the edge where they fall onto this outflow ramp, and you can see that the end of it is curved because the fifth element is a massive circle. Inspired by this one in Ball Simulations V21, the table is made up of 4 multicolor 3D printed panels. As the balls land on the table, the steel arms are constantly circling, directing the balls to the holes in the plate. To drive the arms, the hub gear meshes with the gear on the motor shaft, and as the balls fall through the holes, they roll down the internal ramp and out into the next element. I feel like this table should be pretty efficient, right? Definitely more efficient than element 6, the classic stair stepper, which shows up in a few different flavors in ball simulations. My version is driven by opposing cams, and when the shorter ramp is at the top of its stroke, it meets up with the next longer ramp at its bottom. For smooth motion, the ramps are on rollers with embedded bearings, and there are 2 identical cams on each ramp to ensure an even upward push. One thing that I didn't fully account for is the bounce when the balls go from one ramp to the next. So you can see that the balls are sometimes bouncing off the next ramp and back down the stairs. And for this reason, I feel like this may be one of the worst performers in our efficiency testing. But with element 6 down, the 7th is probably the most complex out of all of them, the pick and place machine, which was inspired by this one in Ball Simulations V17. I decided to use rack and pinions to open and close the grippers, driven by a servo motor. The clear picker halves were printed on my Form 4L and slide on these linear bearings. It was working so well that I decided to use the same mechanism for the lifting motion, but I had to add a constant force spring here to assist the motor with the lift. The whole thing pivots on this base where there's another servo motor embedded to actuate the motion. As far as efficiency is concerned, this one's kind of hard to put an estimate on because I have no idea what's going to happen when the picking bowl is completely filled, but we won't find out yet because we still have 5 more elements to build. Next is another classic, Plinko, which was supposed to be a quick and easy design, but on the first attempt, all the balls jammed. Upon closer inspection, they were getting caught on the end pins, so we removed them and got much better flow, although there was still jamming. This is designed to be getting balls in spurts from the pick and place arm, so I'm not sure what's going to happen on the efficiency test. The next element, inspired by this one from Ball Simulation V27, may also be a liability in the efficiency test. Made up of these individual chain links, it's hard to get that animation style consistency between the links, so there are sometimes gaps between the blades while it's running. The chain is driven through this sprocket, which is meshed via a gear to the motor, and when the links are traveling down the straight segments, you can see that the blades are tight together, making this perfect ball moving tray. But when they come around the turn, they split apart, dropping the balls into their next element, which is the open axle double tumbler. In order to eliminate the need for a center axle, the outer walls of the tumbler sit on this rolling guide system. And to get the tumbler spinning, there's an embedded gear tooth profile around the outside of each wall, which meshes with the motor gear. As the balls enter the tumbler, they get collected by one of the internal scoops, which are designed to drop the balls at the exact right position onto the outflow ramp, which cascades into the next tumbler where it's repeated, and then they flow out to the next element. This one feels pretty efficient, but I'm not sure if its speed is going to hurt its overall score in testing. Alright, so that's 10 elements down, but now it's time to do some heavy lifting so we can complete this circuit. Element 11 is a classic Archimedes screw-style grain elevator, adapted from a random test piece I made for my Marble Pixel project. Although we supersized it, and the biggest challenge building this was trying to figure out how to cut this big acrylic pipe evenly. We settled on resting the pipe on these rollers made from scrap laser cut material, then we clamped a reciprocating saw to the table, which was actually working until... Just kidding, this actually works surprisingly well.
Beautiful, dude.
I was super pumped about this. The pipe is held by this inflow bracket, and the screw is driven by a geared motor, and you can see that it moves the marbles quite well, but it doesn't lift them high enough to complete the circuit, which brings us to the final element, the lift conveyor. This comes up many times in ball simulations videos, probably because it's the best way to gain height quickly. It's also come up many times in different Engineezy videos over the years. The chain is driven by a motor connected to this sprocket, and when the balls enter the inflow ramp, they fall into the grooves on the chain. The angle of the conveyor ensures that the balls don't fall out of the chain segments until they come over the top sprocket, where they drop out of the grooves and down the outflow ramp. When I started this project, I honestly didn't set out to build 12 elements, but here we are. Which one is your favorite? But also, which one do you think is going to perform best in the efficiency test? For that, we're going to pour 360 grams of marbles into each module and see how long it takes for them to flow out the other side. Then we're going to weigh the outflow to see how many were lost in the process and determine the efficiency. The hopper is definitely the benchmark because it only took 7 seconds to process all the marbles and it didn't lose a single one. My baby. Next up is the vortex, which, oh god, that's gonna be fun. But 44.85 seconds at an efficiency of 88.89, not great. The pusher, also known as the churner, was actually the first model I designed for this project, coming in at 18.39 seconds and an efficiency of 98.33%. Let's go. Next is the minecart, which is probably my favorite. The gliding on the rails is just so satisfying. And that comes in at 44.5 seconds with a 0 miss, 100% efficiency rating. That is what's up. Can the turntable beat that? This is probably my favorite aesthetic of all the modules, and I expected it not to drop any marbles, but with a time of 40.06 seconds, it dropped quite a few marbles with an efficiency of 93.33%. The stepper-driven stepper ended up being the most annoying to design because sliding things just generally suck to design, and it also had the longest time by a long shot, coming in at 150 seconds, although its efficiency was 98.33%, which isn't bad. The claw is another one of my favorites. I guess I just love the mechatronics models most, although it's not that fast, coming in at a time of 86.67 seconds and a total efficiency of 97.22. The first Plinko attempt jammed pretty hard, but we gave it another shot with the slower pour and it performed really well with a time of 37.83 seconds and an efficiency of 98.89. Coming to the final four, the centipede, which will never see this volume of marbles in the full run, held its own with a time of 38.35 seconds, but its efficiency was a bit lower at 94.44%. The tumbler, which is another favorite, the no axle design is just so clean looking, came in with a time of 39.26 seconds and an efficiency rating of 98.33%. Next is the auger, which has the capability to move a ton of marbles cleanly, was able to get the marbles to the top fast in like 44 seconds, 0 loss, but then the ramp took its sweet time to unload, bringing the total time to 97 seconds. And with a bunch of marbles left on the ramp, the efficiency was just 82.22%, which might not be a fair test for the auger, but science is science. Last, but definitely not least, is the conveyor, which on the first test, the ending ramp jump thing completely clogged. That would kill the entire machine. So I added this insert ramp, I know, less fun, but we ended up with a 55-second run at a 99.44% efficiency. Looking at all the data side by side, you can see that there's quite a bit of discrepancy, but what's more useful is to look at the overall flow rate in grams per second through the system, because it shows that there's probably going to be a bottleneck at the vortex and then another right here in the middle with the stepper and the claw. Setting up all the elements into the big machine was a surprisingly smooth operation. There was a moment here where the stepper didn't align properly with the claw.
Ruh-roh.
Other way. You're good.
But that was just an indication of how many marbles I've lost during this project because it was literally just backwards. It's really cool to see something, especially on this scale, go from a computer model to existing in real life. But now it's time for the ultimate test. And I'm really excited to see this thing run, but I'm also so scared because it's been so much work, like the brain hurting kind of work, to get to this point. Everything is set up. I did weigh all the balls before dropping them into this hopper, so we're gonna be able to know exactly how efficient this thing is after it fully runs, which means that all that's left to do is cue the classic ball simulation music and let it rip. I'm so happy with how this turned out, but is it as satisfying as a simulation? That's something for you to decide. And after closing the hopper door and letting it run all the way through, you can see that many marbles chose to explore the free world instead of returning back to their starting point, which begs the final question, how efficient is the overall machine?
Okay.
With a final weight of 2.236 kilograms out of the original 2.978, the total efficiency of the system is 75%, which means that's a lot of marbles to pick up.